My daughter-in-law blocked me, but didn't know I was paying their rent. It wasn't the first time Stephanie had taken a jab at me, but it was the first time I couldn't even respond. One minute, I was looking at pictures of my grandson's school recital, and the next, I was blocked from her profile. I checked twice, thinking maybe it was a mistake. Then I realized Mark had done the same. Both of them had cut me off like I was some stranger who had no place in their lives. No explanation, no warning. Just silence. I sat on the couch holding my phone, watching the little spinning wheel on the app, hoping it was a glitch. I refreshed the page again and again. Nothing. It wasn't a mistake. They meant it. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. The last conversation I had with Mark was over dinner 3 weeks ago. I had offered to split the bill, like I always did. Stephanie rolled her eyes and said, "You don't need to do that, Diane. We've got it." But the tone wasn't kind. It was final, cold. I told them I was happy to contribute. I always had been. That's when she muttered something I didn't catch. When I asked her to repeat it, she just smiled at Mark and said, "Never mind." Apparently, that was my farewell. I sat there on my couch for a long time that evening. I didn't cry. I wish I had. Crying would have felt human, but instead, it was like my body just went quiet. My phone didn't ring. No one came to check. I just stared at the blank screen, blocked by the same people I had spent the last 4 years quietly supporting. They never knew I still paid for their apartment. Or maybe they forgot. When Mark got laid off back in 2020, they were panicked. They had a newborn and barely any savings. I stepped in without hesitation. "It's just for a while," I said, "until you get back on your feet." I even signed the lease in my name. The landlord wanted someone with stable income, and, at the time, I was still working part-time and collecting my pension. Mark promised it would be temporary. Stephanie never thanked me. Not once. The payments became automatic. Month after month, the money left my account. I stopped thinking about it like a gift. It became more like a tax, a quiet, invisible tax on my love for them. And then they blocked me. A week passed, then another. No messages, no emails, no apologies. I kept trying to justify it. Maybe they were just overwhelmed. Maybe Stephanie was hormonal. Maybe Mark didn't even know. But deep down, I knew exactly what it was. I wasn't needed anymore. They had taken what they needed from me, and now that I didn't serve a purpose, they moved on. I was no longer the emergency fund. I was no longer the grandmother. I was just Diane, the woman who didn't know when to leave them alone. It's funny how fast they rewrite your role. I tried reaching out once. I sent Mark a message. Nothing aggressive, just, "Hi, haven't heard from you in a while. Hope all is okay." No response. After 2 days, I saw the message was marked read. That was all the answer I needed. Then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from the building manager of their apartment. "Ms. Diane, just a reminder, rent is due on the 5th. We didn't receive the auto payment this month." I felt my stomach twist. I hadn't canceled the payment. I double-checked. My account showed that the usual transfer hadn't gone through. I called the bank. They told me the auto debit had been rejected because the lease account was closed. I called the property manager again. That's when he told me they transferred the lease to Mark and Stephanie last month. "You're no longer on it." They had removed my name without telling me, without asking me. They changed the lease but hadn't even bothered to take over the payment. They probably assumed I would keep paying, out of guilt or habit. And I almost did. That night, I sat with my checkbook, phone in hand, and stared at the payment portal. My hand hovered over the button. It would have been so easy. One click, and the problem would disappear for them. They wouldn't even know it was me. But that's what broke me. They wouldn't know, because they had already forgotten. I didn't make the payment. 2 days later, I received a voicemail from Mark. The first message in weeks. "Hey, Mom, We're having some issues with the rent this month. There must have been a problem with the auto pay thing. Could you check your end and see what's going on? Stephanie's been really stressed. Just call me back, okay? No apology. No explanation. No mention of being blocked. Just an expectation. Like nothing had happened. I didn't call him back. The next day, Stephanie sent a text. Not even to me. She sent it to my sister, asking if I was mad about something and if I was going through something. She called it a misunderstanding. My sister forwarded me the message. I didn't reply. That weekend, I finally told my sister everything. The lease, the payments, the blocking, the silence. She was shocked. But what really got her was when I said, "I'm done." She looked at me like I had just dropped a child into the ocean. "You can't just stop helping them, Diane. They're your family." I stared at her for a long time before I said, "They stopped being my family when I became their silent ATM." She didn't have anything to say to that. The silence after that week was louder than anything else. No more calls, no texts. I started sleeping better. I went on walks again. I visited the library for the first time in years. The money that used to leave my account, I started using it for myself. A good pair of walking shoes. Groceries that I used to think were too expensive. A hair appointment I had put off for over a year. They didn't reach out again, not until the eviction notice arrived at their door. And that's when the real message came. Stephanie showed up at my front door. Red-faced, angry, her hair pulled back tight, holding a crying toddler in one arm and a paper in the other. "You stopped paying the rent?" I didn't invite her in. I didn't offer a chair. I stood there, calm, quiet. She shoved the paper toward me. "Do you have any idea what you've done? We're being kicked out." I looked at her for a long time before I answered. "No, Stephanie. What you did was remove me from your life. What I did was respect that." Her mouth opened, then closed. She didn't expect that. Not from me. Not from the quiet woman who always said yes. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just closed the door, and I didn't look back. After I closed the door on Stephanie, I didn't move for a full minute. I stood in the hallway listening to her footsteps as she walked away from my porch. I heard the baby crying louder now, her voice sharp and frustrated in the driveway. The sound of a car, door slamming, then silence again. It was the same kind of silence I had learned to live with. I went back to the kitchen, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the table. My hand trembled a little, not because I was nervous or scared, but because something had finally shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something harder to name. Something that comes when you stop trying to fix things that clearly never wanted to be fixed. Mark didn't call that night. He didn't call the next day either. 3 days later, I got a formal-looking envelope in the mail from the rental company. They had forwarded a notice of late payment and reminded me, very politely, that I was no longer financially responsible for the unit, as per the updated lease. It was addressed to me out of habit, I think. It was strange to see my name on something that no longer had anything to do with me. The funny part, I felt relieved. For years, I had been carrying their struggles like they were mine. Every rent payment, every quiet emergency they never wanted to discuss, every problem they didn't want their friends to know about, those landed on me. Always silently, always unspoken, but now it wasn't mine anymore, and I wasn't going to take it back. The next time Mark contacted me was 4 days after Stephanie's visit. He didn't call. He sent a voice message, not a phone call, not a proper conversation, just his voice in a recording. "Hey, Mom, look, I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know if you're upset about something, but it's really not fair to take it out on us like this. I know you were helping with rent, and we appreciate it. I mean, we did, but it wasn't meant to be forever. We're trying our best here, okay? It's just a bad time. Could you maybe call me?" I didn't reply, because I'd heard this tone before. The calm, rehearsed, "We're trying our best," that always came after they needed something. When they were traveling, no calls. When they bought that new sectional couch for the living room I never saw. Nothing. When I was babysitting for free so they could go on weekend getaways, not even a thank you note. Now, they remembered I existed. I didn't listen to the message. Twice. I deleted it. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing. No more doorsteps, no calls, no messages. Then one morning, I was walking through the grocery store, finally enjoying a day that didn't involve worrying about their rent, when I saw Stephanie. She was at the self-checkout, arguing with the machine. The toddler, my granddaughter, was seated in the cart, face red from crying. Stephanie's hair was messy, she had no makeup on, and her eyes looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. She looked up and saw me. I thought she'd pretend not to know me. But instead, she walked straight over. "Diane," she said. "I think we should talk." I stared at her. Not unkindly, but not warmly either. "I'm not sure what there is to say," I replied. Her voice was lower now. Not sharp, not confrontational. "We made a mistake. I made a mistake. I didn't say anything. We thought you'd just keep helping. I didn't think you'd actually walk away." She gave a nervous laugh that didn't fit her face. "Mark told me you were upset, but I didn't realize it had gone this far." "It didn't go far," I said calmly. "It just ended." Stephanie's eyes welled up. She blinked fast. "We're getting eviction warnings now. Mark's been trying to pick up extra shifts. We're not sleeping. We're fighting. It's all falling apart." I didn't flinch. Not because I didn't care, but because it was no longer mine to carry. She shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "He said maybe you'd changed, that you weren't the same anymore." I nodded. "He's right." Stephanie exhaled hard. "He said you're being cruel, that you cut us off without warning." That made me laugh. I hadn't planned to. It just came out. A short, dry sound. "I gave you 4 years of help," I said. "I paid your rent in silence. I was never thanked. I was never invited to holidays, birthdays, dinners, and then you blocked me, and you're saying I cut you off without warning?" Stephanie looked away. We stood there for a few seconds. Just 2 women in a grocery store, standing between the dairy section and a shelf of canned tomatoes. 2 women who shared nothing except a last name through marriage and a child between them. "Is there anything else, Stephanie?" Her voice cracked just a little. "Do you want to see her?" She gestured to the cart. My granddaughter was still crying, still tired, still small and unaware of any of the tension around her. For a moment, my chest tightened. Of course I wanted to see her. Of course I wanted to hold her, hug her, tell her it wasn't her fault. But I also knew this wasn't about her. This wasn't a gesture of peace. It was bait. I shook my head. "Not like this." Stephanie's face fell. I turned and walked away, and I didn't look back. That night, I opened my computer and checked my bank statement. I looked through every expense from the past year: groceries, pharmacy runs, utility bills, birthday gifts I mailed that were never acknowledged, and those 48 rent payments. 4 years of being needed, but never appreciated. Then I opened a new tab and searched for something I hadn't let myself consider in a long time: a weekend trip. Just for me. I found a quiet rental cabin near a lake, small, nothing fancy, just enough to breathe. I booked it. 2 days later, I packed a small bag, left my phone on silent, and drove. No one knew where I went. No one asked. No one called. I stood on the edge of that lake with my shoes off, the water just touching my toes, and I realized something. That hit harder than I expected. They didn't miss me. They missed what I gave them, and when I stopped giving, they finally noticed. But I wasn't going back. When I came back from the lake trip, the house felt quieter than usual. Not in a peaceful way, more like the air had shifted. Something had ended, and I wasn't pretending otherwise anymore. I unpacked slowly, folded my clothes neatly, put things back where they belonged, everything in its place. It was the kind of control I hadn't felt in years. For a long time, My life had been dictated by the silent weight of obligation, always thinking about Mark and Stephanie first, always prioritizing their needs over my own comfort. Their birthdays, their bills, their emotional messes. Now, for the first time in years, I was fully alone in my space, and I wasn't afraid of it. That following Monday, I went to the bank. I sat across from a young advisor who reminded me of Stephanie. Perfect posture, polite smile, eyes that scanned everything as if calculating its worth. She tapped on her keyboard while I handed her the papers for the lease transfer I had found in my files. Apparently, the landlord had forgotten to remove me from the notification list when the change was made. I asked her to walk me through every single payment I had made over the last 4 years. Every check, every debit, every auto transfer. I wanted to see it in black and white. When she printed the report and placed it in front of me, the numbers were hard to look at. I had paid nearly $71,000 in rent over 4 years. $71,000, all while being blocked, all while being ignored, all while being called dramatic behind my back. I thanked her and took the report home. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just opened a drawer in my kitchen and filed it away next to my will and medical records. That's the day I realized I'd never get that money back, but I could get my peace. 2 days later, Mark showed up at my front door. He didn't call, didn't text, just rang the bell. I didn't answer right away. I watched him from behind the curtain. He looked tired. His hair was messy, and his eyes looked heavy. I opened the door, but only halfway. "Mom," he said, "can we talk? I'm listening." He looked thrown off by how calm I sounded. He was expecting the old me, nervous, eager, waiting to make peace. "Can I come in?" "No," I said, still calm. "Say what you came to say." He shifted his weight, cleared his throat. "We're being evicted. Stephanie's been talking to legal aid. They said maybe we can delay it, but the back rent's too much." I thought, maybe, you'd want to help us just one last time. I felt something crack inside, but it wasn't pain. It was clarity. "Mark," I said slowly, "you removed me from the lease without telling me. You let Stephanie block me. You let me pay rent without so much as a thank you. You made a choice." He looked down. "I didn't want to upset her." "And what about me?" He didn't answer. "I was never your priority, Mark. I was your backup plan, your safety net." "That's not true," he said, but the words had no weight. "I paid for everything while you two built a life that excluded me. Trips, dinners. You let her act like I didn't exist. And now that you're in trouble, suddenly I matter again?" He didn't speak. I stepped back from the door. "This conversation is over." "Mom, please." "I'm not your emergency exit anymore. You'll have to figure it out without me." And I closed the door. I stood there for a moment, waiting to feel guilty. I didn't. I made myself some tea. I turned on the TV. And when I looked out the window, Mark was gone. That night, Stephanie sent a long email. It started with, "I'm sorry if we made you feel unappreciated," and spiraled into a laundry list of excuses about stress, parenting, and trying our best. She ended it by saying she hoped I could forgive them, but also asked, again, if I could loan them 2 months' rent to get back on track. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the email, folded it neatly, and placed it in the same drawer as the bank statement. I was building a file now, not for revenge, not for court, but to remind myself, on the days I questioned my decision, of exactly why I stopped. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the landlord. He said the apartment had been vacated, that the couple left without a word, and that the place was in bad shape. Stains, broken fixtures, holes in the walls. He sounded more annoyed than surprised. I asked him not to contact me again about the unit. "They're not my responsibility anymore," I said, and he understood. A week passed, then another, and then, one afternoon, a small envelope arrived. No name on the return address, just handwriting I recognized instantly. Mark. Inside, a single piece of paper. Mom, I don't know what to say. I messed up. I should have stood up for you. I should have told Stephanie to stop. I should have told you we were struggling instead of hiding it. You didn't deserve how we treated you. I understand now why you stopped. I'm sorry. I hope someday you'll talk to me again. No signature. No number. I folded the letter, placed it with the others. That night, I sat outside on my porch listening to the crickets. I didn't know if I'd ever forgive Mark. I didn't know if I'd ever speak to Stephanie again. But I did know one thing. I was done begging to be included in a life that only wanted me. When it was convenient, I looked up at the sky. It was quiet. It was mine. The letter stayed in the drawer, untouched. I never responded to it. I never told Mark I got it. But I read it more than once. Each time I read it, something different stood out. The first time, it was the apology. The second time, it was the phrasing. I hope someday you'll talk to me again. Not, I hope to make things right. Not, I want to fix what I did. Just a hope that I would reach out again. The burden still placed on me. And that's when I realized that even his apology wasn't really about change. It was about guilt. About trying to soften the consequences without doing the work. 2 months went by after the letter. I didn't hear from Mark or Stephanie. It was the longest stretch of silence since everything had started, and at first I wondered if it would hold. Part of me hoped that it meant they were figuring things out, that they had found a way to live without my help. Maybe they had gotten a cheaper apartment. Maybe they had finally faced the reality I shielded them from for years. But then came the knock of Friday afternoon, just after I'd returned from the grocery store. I was putting away eggs when the sound startled me. Sharp, rushed, anxious. I looked through the peephole. It was Stephanie. I didn't open the door. She knocked again. Then again, and then I heard her voice. Diane, please, I just need 5 minutes. I stood there, arms crossed, debating whether I owed her those 5 minutes. Eventually, I opened the door, but I didn't step aside. Stephanie looked thinner, not sickly, but worn. Her hair was tied back messily, and she was holding a small envelope in one hand. I'm not here to ask for money, she said quickly. I swear. I didn't respond. I just need to explain something. That's all. I still didn't say anything. She looked down at her shoes, shifted her weight, then held out the envelope. I wanted to give this to you. It's receipts. All the rent you paid. We didn't realize how much it was. Not until we had to start doing it ourselves. I took the envelope, still silent. It was heavier than I expected. I know I can't undo anything, and I know you don't trust us anymore, but I wanted you to know we're not expecting anything from you. We're working now, both of us. Mark got a warehouse job. I'm waitressing at a diner. Still, I said nothing. She looked up at me. I didn't understand what you were doing for us. I thought you just wanted control. That's how Mark made it sound. That you were always interfering. That you couldn't let go. She paused, waiting for me to react. I didn't. But now I see it. You weren't controlling us. You were carrying us. And we let you. I nodded once. Stephanie shifted, embarrassed. Anyway, I just wanted you to have those. And to say thank you. I took the envelope and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't smile. I didn't say goodbye. I went to the kitchen table, sat down, and opened it. Inside were photocopies of every lease statement, every payment receipt, and a handwritten list of all the months I had, covered from the first one to the last. It was all there. Every dollar. At the bottom, in Stephanie's handwriting, we didn't know. We should have. We're sorry. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. I placed the envelope in the drawer with the letter from Mark in the bank records. And that night, for the first time since this all began, I dreamed of nothing. No anger. No guilt. Just sleep. A week later, I got a call from Mark. I let it go to voicemail. He left a short message. "Hey Mom, I know you're probably not ready to talk. Just wanted to say, thank you. We're figuring it out." That was it. No begging, no asking, just a statement. I played the message twice, then deleted it. Not out of anger. Just because I didn't need it anymore. I started doing something I hadn't done in years. Planning trips. Not big ones. Nothing flashy. Just weekends away. I drove to small towns I'd never visited. I spent afternoons in bookstores, ate in little cafes, walked without a plan. I even got a part-time job at a local garden center. Not because I needed the money, but because I missed talking to people who didn't want something from me. Customers asked for plant advice. I gave it. They said thank you. Simple human things. One Saturday morning, while watering the orchids in the back, I heard someone say my name. Diane? I turned around. It was Linda, a woman I hadn't seen in over a decade. We used to work together before I retired. She was holding a pot of herbs and smiling. "I almost didn't recognize you," she said. "You look calm." I laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in a while. We talked for 20 minutes. She told me about her grandkids. I told her I'd just started traveling a little. She invited me to join her book club. I said maybe. After she left, I stood in the aisle between the hydrangeas and the succulents, and I realized something. I wasn't the woman who waited for her son to call anymore. I was Diane. I had a name outside of Mom, and I was starting to live like it. It had been nearly 3 months since I last saw Mark or Stephanie. The envelope Stephanie left on my doorstep was the final piece of the puzzle. After that, there were no more knocks, no more voicemails. Just silence. I liked it. I filled my time with work at the garden center, slow mornings, crossword puzzles, and walks that didn't need a destination. I wasn't pretending to be happy. I was actually content. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody sent passive-aggressive texts. Nobody made me feel like I was a burden and a necessity at the same time. I could finally hear myself think. And yet, every now and then, I'd check the drawer, the receipts, the letter. That voicemail I deleted but still remembered word for word. It was like reading the last chapter of a story you didn't enjoy, but couldn't stop from finishing. Then, in late October, I got a letter in the mail, not from Mark or Stephanie, but from a lawyer. I sat down with it, confused. I hadn't been in contact with anyone in months. The envelope was plain, no return address. The letterhead read Wilson and Gordon Family Mediation Services. My heart stopped for a moment. For a split second, I thought Mark and Stephanie were suing me for something. But when I read it, I realized it wasn't that. It was a mediation request. Mark had listed me as a person he hoped to reestablish family trust with, and the letter asked if I would consider attending a meeting. Voluntary, no legal weight, just a safe space to talk things through. I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because that's what it had come to. My own son hiring strangers to help him talk to me. I placed the letter on the counter and didn't touch it for 3 days. On the 4th, I responded, declined. I didn't explain myself. I didn't owe an explanation. 2 weeks later, Mark showed up again. Not at my house. At the garden center, I was watering the rosemary section when I heard his voice. "Hi, Mom." I turned around slowly. He was standing there, hands in his pockets, a hesitant smile on his face. "You shouldn't come here," I said flatly. "I know," he nodded. "I just thought maybe we could talk." I wiped my hands on my apron. What part of no was unclear in the mediation response? I need to say it. Say what? He looked down. "I failed you, as a son." That caught me, off guard. "I let Stephanie treat you like a problem. I treated you like a solution, not a person. I get it now. I really do." I stayed silent. Mark's voice was lower now. "We moved in with her cousin. It's tight. 2 rooms for 5 people. I sleep on the couch. Stephanie's working nights. I'm working early mornings. We barely see each other. We're paying rent, but we're broke every week. I haven't bought coffee from a shop in months. I haven't had a minute to breathe. And you came to tell me that why? He blinked. Because I didn't understand what you were doing for us until now. Mark, I said quietly. You were never supposed to understand through suffering. You were supposed to understand through love. But you didn't want to. He looked down. I didn't want to choose between my wife and my mother. You didn't have to choose. You just had to act like a grown man. Instead, you watched me be erased. He had no response to that. I stepped past him and went back to the storage area where I wouldn't have to listen. He didn't follow me. That evening, I got a text from Stephanie. It was the first one since the day she showed up with the envelope. Stephanie, I heard Mark came by. He shouldn't have. I told him to leave you alone. But for what it's worth, I know I played a big part in how things fell apart. Stephanie, I blamed you for being overbearing when really I was insecure. I was embarrassed that we needed your help. And instead of saying thank you, I tried to act like we didn't need you at all. Stephanie, that was wrong. Stephanie, no response necessary. I just wanted you to know. I stared at the screen for a long time, and then, without thinking much, I did respond. Me, it's done. No need to keep digging. That was all. She didn't reply after that. A week later, my sister-in-law called me, Mark's aunt, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She said Mark had asked her to reach out, not to fix anything, just to tell Diane we're not expecting her to come back, but we hope she's okay. I thanked her. I didn't comment further. The next morning, I got a package, small box, no name. Inside was a photo frame. It was a picture of me holding my granddaughter during her first birthday. Back when I was still included, Stephanie must have taken the photo. On the back of the frame, a note. She misses you. We told her you're traveling, that you're happy. I placed the photo on the kitchen shelf. I didn't cry, but I sat down and stared at it for a while. I did miss her, but not enough to put myself back in a place where I was only loved when I was useful. That's the difference now. Before, I would have taken the picture as an invitation to come back. Now, I took it for what it was, a small, overdue thank you, and that was enough. Thanksgiving came and went without a single call from Mark or Stephanie. It used to be a day where I cooked too much, cleaned too much, and sat at the end of the table hoping someone would ask me how I was doing. No one ever did. This year, I didn't cook for anyone. I heated up a tray of lasagna, opened a bottle of wine, and watched an old movie I hadn't seen since the 90s. No stress, no pressure to smile, no pretending everything was fine while being treated like background noise. In the middle of the second act, I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. The voicemail came a few minutes later. It was Stephanie. She didn't ask for anything. She just said, I hope you're doing something peaceful today. It should have made me feel something. But all it did was confirm what I already knew. They finally understood that I wasn't waiting for the door to be reopened. The next week, I went to the garden center and handed in my notice. Not because of anything that happened, but because I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had taken the job to remind myself I was useful, that people valued me, but I didn't need those reminders anymore. I valued myself now. That was enough. The day I left, Linda gave me a small potted orchid with a card that read, To the strongest woman I know. Enjoy your peace. I brought it home and placed it on my windowsill. I started volunteering at a local community kitchen 2 afternoons a week. The work was humbling, but simple. No one asked where I came from. No one cared if I had a family. They just appreciated the help. No guilt, trips, no expectations, just kindness. Exchanged quietly. About a month later, in January, I ran into one of Stephanie's old co-workers at the grocery store. We weren't close, but she recognized me instantly. She said Stephanie had picked up another job and was juggling shifts just to keep the rent paid. She didn't say it with gossip in her voice, just a quiet update, like I might want to know. I didn't ask for more. I just nodded and kept shopping. I think people assumed I was bitter, that I had cut my family off because I was cold or unforgiving. But the truth is, I had tried every door before I finally walked away. I had tried being patient. I had tried speaking calmly. I had tried staying silent. I had tried helping from the background. I had tried stepping back. I had tried re-entering, gently. Every time I was met with entitlement and disrespect. Walking away wasn't an act of revenge. It was the last option after all the others had been exhausted. I didn't block Mark's number. I didn't block Stephanie's either. But I never called them, and they stopped calling too. I think they finally understood the damage they did. Maybe not fully, but enough to stay quiet. One afternoon in late February, I received a small card in the mail. It was handwritten. No envelope, no signature, just 6 words. We know you were the glue. I placed it in the drawer with everything else. That drawer had become like a little museum of what I'd survived. The rent records, the receipts, the letter from Mark, the note from Stephanie, that anonymous card, evidence, not for anyone else, for me, to remind myself that I hadn't imagined the weight I carried. Spring came early that year. I cleaned the porch, bought new cushions for the outdoor chairs, and started planting again. Lavender, thyme, a few tomato plants. Things that needed care but gave something back. Unlike what I used to do. One morning, while I was watering the garden, a neighbor stopped by. New couple, mid-30s, just moved in. The wife said, "We're having a small barbecue next Saturday if you want to join us." I almost said no, but I didn't. "I'll bring lemonade," I said instead, and I did. No one knew about Mark. No one asked. They just included me in a small way. It reminded me of what family could have felt like if it had been real. By summer, I had donated most of what was in that drawer. I kept one item, the photo of me holding my granddaughter on her first birthday, because that memory didn't belong to them. It belonged to me. I didn't call her. I didn't try to visit. I knew Mark and Stephanie had probably moved again. Maybe they told her stories about me. Maybe they didn't. But I knew one day, when she grew older, she'd ask questions. And I knew the answers would come out. I didn't need to force it. Time would do the talking. And by then, I'd be ready, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was free.